how's it going? Welcome back to What's in the Shop. I have to apologize. It's been a lot longer than I expected to do another video. It's been about a month actually, but that's the way it goes when you're living in a COVID haze. I'm sure you all can understand. I have some interesting records, what I find interesting, that I want to talk about with you guys just to show you what's in the shop. So what do you say we get started? How about this? The debut from Tears for Fears. This is The Hurting. A lot of people like, well, songs from The Big Chair, their second album, is what took them worldwide and made them huge, huge pop stars. But I prefer this one. It's a little more somber, and, well, it has my favorite Tears for Fears song on it anyway, Ideas for Opiates. This went #1 for the band and spawned three top 5 singles, Change, Hell Shelter, and Mad World. When it first came out, though, people weren't that crazy about it. The NME kind of slagged it off and said it was the useless sort of art that made futility and self-pity a commercial proposition. That's pretty good. Mojo magazine, on the other hand, said, has there ever been a more thoroughly miserable mainstream pop album than The Hurting? Has there been? I don't know. It is pretty dour when you listen to it and pretty depressing, but it's still good. A more recent review from Pop Matters said, has there ever been, that this is one of the most fully realized pop debuts of the early 80s, and I have to agree. You may like songs from The Big Chair, but give this a listen, and I'm sure you'll like this a lot too. Tears for Fears, The Hurting. Next up, this was a single only. It wasn't on any album. The House Martins, Caravan of Love. This is, actually, I love this 12-inch EP. There's 5 songs, I believe. Yes, and it's all a cappella, totally a cappella. They're doing an old gospel song, actually. This was #4 for them in '86. A year earlier, it was #1 for Jasper Isley, who split off from the Isley Brothers. And it was a song kind of talking about a more spiritual side of life, a more Christian point of view that some of the band members had taken since they left the Isley Brothers. But the House Martins did it all a cappella, and it's awesome that they extended it to 5 songs on here. It was the band's only #1 single. And what's funny about this is that the House Martins, they did this first on John Peel's radio show. John Peel was so impressed that he asked the band to come back and sing again, not as the House Martins, but as the Fish City 5, and do an all a cappella session for the radio. And they did. And they had so much fun with it that they actually went out and did a couple gigs as the Fish City 5, where they served as their own opening act when they would come back out with instruments as the House Martins. I also like on the back the closing statement here on the credits. Power to the people, respect for the steeple. Awesome. House Martins, Caravan of Love. Next up, this is a biggie, y'all. Simon and Garfunkel, Bookends, iconic album cover shot by Richard Avedon. You may know the newer version that Kruder and Dorfmeister did. Anyway, about this album, it's really interesting. When they started this, well, first of all, this was the band's 4th album, and it was actually their first #1 album. 10 weeks or 10 months before this, I don't know, a short time before this album was released, the soundtrack to The Graduate came out. And we all know how that blew up. It was a big album, and it was a big movie. The Graduate and then this actually made Simon and Garfunkel the biggest rock duo in the world. Imagine that. At that time, they were huge, just like Beatles, just like the Stones. Anyway, it's interesting because Paul Simon had said before they made this album, he was tired of writing singles, didn't want to do it anymore. He wanted to be more serious and do complete works as an album, and that's what they tried to do with this record. He also said that he was very, very influenced after listening to the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper. And Bookends is actually a concept album where it takes, well, the life of an individual from early on as a young child up through their golden years and old age, so to speak. It's a fantastic record. Of course, it has one of their biggest hits ever, Mrs. Robinson, on it. which actually became the first rock and roll song to be Record of the Year in the Grammys in 1969. So that's pretty awesome if you think about it. This record was, when it was released, it was priced $1 higher than all other records, and it was suggested retail of $5.98. Paul Simon was furious about it. He didn't think that it was necessary. But Clive Davis, who ran Columbia at the time, said they had to recoup because the album had a big poster inside, not to mention having to pay off Richard Avedon to do the cover portrait. This copy here in the store, it does have the poster inside, which looks like this. Paul Simon, though, argued with Clive Davis because he thought this album was going to be the biggest selling album the label had that year anyway, and instead of letting Davies raise the price, Simon and Garfunkel actually renegotiated their recording contract and just took higher royalties so they could sell the album cheap. One of my favorite songs on here, though, is called Fakin' It. And it's funny because at the time, radio stations were still very particular about only playing songs 3 minutes or under to be played on the radio. Fakin' It clocked in at 3:17. Simon and Garfunkel put the single out, and on the label, they put the time as 2 minutes, 74 seconds. Obviously trying to pull a fast one on unwitting DJs who weren't really paying attention, and they just looked at the label and saw, oh, it's 2:74, I could play it. It's under 3 minutes. This album, classic, like I said, classic portrait, just fantastic record. One of the Rolling Stone names it as one of the top 500 albums of all time, and it's also included in the 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die book. Next up, this is one of those records. When I would see this record, it's one of those where I'm always like, who is this guy? And why is he always with chicks? Bob Welch. French Kiss. Who's Bob Welch, you might say? Join the club. I did a lot too. I have to say, though, before I explain, I always like looking at this album cover. I don't know why. There's just something about it. This lady, the fire, I don't know. Maybe it's visceral. I don't know what it is, but I like it. Anyway, Bob Welch was in Fleetwood Mac. He was a guitar player in Fleetwood Mac from 71 to 74. I think he did 4 albums with them. This was his debut after he left Fleetwood Mac. He had to leave Fleetwood Mac because Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks came in, and we all know what happened with Fleetwood Mac after that. Anyway, Bob Welch, this was his debut, and it was actually platinum, went platinum, thanks mainly to the track Sentimental Lady and Ebony Eyes. Sentimental Lady was huge for him, and he actually recorded that with Fleetwood Mac. I think it was on the Bare Trees album. There are some other Macs on here, funny enough. Mick Fleetwood, Christine McVie, and Lindsey Buckingham are all on this album, as is Juice Newton. Great record if you love yacht rock and just kind of easy adult rock. And there's some cool guitar sounds on here. After all, that's what Bob Welch was a guitar player. Next up, my favorite Rory Gallagher album, Photo Finish. This album, I think it was his 9th album, and he returned to form on this album because he started to use a keyboard player and whatever. On this album, he stripped it all back to a 3-piece like he used to be with his original band Taste, so it's a lot more edgier and harder than some of his preceding albums. The story behind this, though, it's called Photo Finish because Rory actually turned the album in at the very last minute that the label was requiring. The thing is, Rory originally recorded this Photo Finish in San Francisco. But when it came down to it and he was supposed to hand the album in, he didn't like the way it was all put together, from his songwriting to the way it was played and whatever, so he scrapped the whole thing at the very last minute. When he was leaving, after telling the record company big shots that he didn't want to put the record out, he hurt his thumb on the cab door. He wasn't able to play guitar for a long time after that, so there was a 2-year wait. Rory picked up, moved to Germany, re-recorded the album with just the 3-piece with his other 2 mates, and this was the result. I love it. Like I said, it's a little bit edgier sound, a little bit harder. Great record. Has Mississippi Sheiks, which I love. And there's also a song on here which was a live favorite called Last of the Independents. Funnily enough, he said he got the idea after reading the review from a Walter Matthau movie called Charlie Varick. Well, guys, we're about out of time. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you find some of those records interesting. Glad to see you all came back. Again, you have any questions, man, send me a message or send an email at the store's email address. Likewise, anything you see, if you want, please send me a direct message as well. I'll happily mail these out to you wherever you are, anything you see. And remember, we also have loads of other stuff in the shop, buttons and books and whatever else. Got lots of cool books coming in for Christmas. Hope to see you out at the shop this weekend. Thanks for coming in. Keep on rocking, guys.